Welcome to Occult Archives,
Uh-huh.
where we like to, dig up the mysteries, the myths and legends behind history's most feared books.
Secret's too dangerous to be read.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And today we're looking at the Complete Treatise on Gold.
Ooh, gold.
This one was actually recommended by a listener.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, so thank you to that listener for sending this in.
Shout out.
And we are going to be diving deep into, the medicinal properties of gold and the philosopher's elixir.
Right.
So this should be fun. This should be a good one.
Always a treat to kind of get into the minds of these, historical figures and see what they were thinking about, gold, health, longevity, transformation,
Yeah, for sure.
all the good stuff.
So right off the bat, this treatise makes a pretty strong argument.
Okay.
It says that just, eating plain gold is not going to do anything for you.
Right.
It's not going to cure your illnesses.
It's not like a multivitamin.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You can't just chew on a gold coin.
Yeah, you hear about ancient cultures drinking out of gold goblets and things like that.
Yeah.
Thinking that that's giving them some sort of health benefit.
Right.
But this treatise says no, not so much.
It's interesting because the author uses this great example with corals
Oh, okay.
to illustrate this point.
Okay.
He says, think about a coral. The essence of it, the good stuff, is like that red color.
Okay.
But to get to that color, you got to separate it from the stone, the body of the coral.
So you can't just, ingest the coral. You gotta get down to the...
Right. It's not about just taking the raw material.
Right.
You got to extract the essence, the potent part.
Okay, so it's not just gold then? Then it sounds like they're saying this applies to.
This is like a principle that they apply to a lot of different materials.
Okay.
Metals, minerals, even plants.
Okay.
They believe that everything had this hidden potential,
Yeah.
its inherent virtue.
Right.
But to unlock it,
Yeah.
you had to process it in the right way.
I see.
So for metals like gold,
Okay.
they would dissolve them,
Okay.
purify them, break them down to what they called their prima materia.
Prima materia.
Yeah, basically the fundamental matter.
Like the most basic building block.
Right. Almost like, if you were to imagine like the very essence of matter before it becomes anything specific. And they believed that this prima materia was the key to unlocking those medicinal properties.
I see.
Like it was in this pure state where it could actually interact with the body and do its thing.
And they say that our bodies can't just process raw gold because our natural body heat isn't strong enough.
Yeah, they actually talk about this. Our bodies can't really cook the metals properly.
Interesting.
Like we don't have the right kind of internal fire.
So they're viewing digestion as kind of like an internal alchemy.
Exactly.
That's a really interesting way to think about it.
Like our stomachs are these little alchemical furnaces.
But they're just not powerful enough to do the real work.
Right, they need a little help.
Okay, so I noticed that the author here spends quite a bit of time talking about how some of these older Arab and Greek physicians, they actually did think raw metals were effective.
Right.
He even mentions specific texts.
So like electuaries de gemmis,
Right.
exhilarante galeni.
And he really pushes back against that.
Yeah, it's like, no, that's not how it works.
So it's interesting to see that kind of debate happening even across centuries,
Yeah.
Like we have these different schools of thought arguing back and forth.
And that really shows you that this wasn't just like a static field.
Yeah.
Medical knowledge was constantly evolving.
Yeah, for sure.
And different people had different ideas about how things worked.
And I love that part about the chickens eating gold leaf.
Yeah, that's a classic.
He's like, no way, that's true.
She's so skeptical.
Yeah.
Like the idea that a chicken could just eat some gold and it would magically turn into medicine.
Right.
It's like, come on.
He's like, where are these golden eggs everybody's talking about?
And he even tried it himself, right? Yeah.
He's like, I fed these chickens gold leaf and all I got was,
right.
chicken poop.
But it's relatable, that sense of like your experiment not working.
Oh, total.
And you're like, oh, man.
Yeah, the frustration of the alchemist.
Yeah.
It's a tale as old as time.
So, okay, raw gold's not going to cut it. We got to dissolve it.
Right.
So they talk about these principles. Mercurius currens, salt and sulfur.
Okay.
But then they say it's not as simple as just getting those things.
Well.
They talk about this guy who had a pound of mercury.
Yeah. Like a whole pound.
And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna do some alchemy.
I'm going to make something amazing.
And it just turned into this, like,
Yeah, just a precipitate, nothing
So
special.
it's like, okay, there's more to it than that.
There's got to be something else going on.
Right, right.
And that's where they introduced this concept of philosophical mercury.
Okay.
Which is not the same as regular mercury.
Okay, so we got to differentiate here.
Right. This is not the stuff you find in a thermometer.
Right. Philosophical mercury, it's like this pure essential principle. And they talk about this idea of fac mercurium per mercurium, making mercury through mercury.
That sounds very circular.
Yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah.
But basically what they're saying is that this philosophical mercury, it's almost like it creates itself.
Okay.
It's like the seed and the fruit at the same time.
So it's like this self-generating process of refinement.
Right. They believed it held the key to all sorts of transformations.
And then there's this crazy line where they say our mercuries are gold and our gold dissolves common gold.
Yeah. What is that even supposed to mean?
Yeah, I'm a little lost on that one.
It's very alchemical,
Right.
very symbolic.
Yeah.
But if we try to unpack it a little bit,
You okay?
I think what they're getting at is that our gold is not like regular gold.
Okay.
It's like gold that's been perfected through the alchemical process.
Like alchemically enhanced
So,
gold.
right. It's like gold plus plus.
Right.
And they're saying that this super gold can dissolve regular gold because it's on a whole other level.
Okay.
It can break down the material form of gold and get to its essence.
And then they use that analogy of mercury dissolving lead
Right.
to explain it.
Like we all know that mercury can dissolve lead.
Right.
But they're saying don't take that too literally.
Right. Don't get hung up on the physical.
Yeah. This is about a deeper philosophical process.
Okay, so there's always like a hidden meaning
Exactly.
with this alchemy stuff.
You got to read between the lines.
And I love that the author's like, yeah, I used to think mercury was the answer.
He was like, I was so naive.
Yeah, he's like, I did all these experiments.
Spent all this time and money.
Yeah, and it just didn't work.
And all he got was a ridiculous mouse.
A ridiculous mouse.
Yeah, it's probably like a metaphor for a failed experiment with a little insignificant outcome.
Kind of a cute way to put it.
Yeah.
So then they talk about the difference between making a tincture
Okay.
and breaking something down to its prima materia, and they use the coral analogy again.
Yeah.
So making a tincture is like getting that red color out.
Right.
But the prima materia is like getting the
fundamental essence.
right.
Like what makes coral coral.
Okay, so they're saying for true medicine,
Yeah.
we need that prima materia,
You need the deep stuff.
not just a tincture.
Right.
Okay, so how did they actually try to prepare medicinal gold?
Well, they had all sorts of methods.
Okay.
But one that's described in detail is this gold oil.
Gold oil.
Yeah.
And this sounds really intense.
Oh, yeah. It's a whole process.
So first they purify the gold with antimony.
Right. And they have this great image of the gray wolf eating the lion.
The gray wolf and the lion.
Yeah. Antimony is the wolf.
Okay.
And gold is the lion.
Oh, okay.
And the wolf devours the lion to purify it.
It's very dramatic.
Very alchemical.
Yeah. So that's a cool image.
It's a good word.
And then they beat the gold into these thin sheets.
Right. Super thin.
And they dissolve it in alkali regis.
Which is a mixture of nitric and hydrochloric acid.
Strong stuff.
Yeah.
And then they add sublimated ammonia.
Right.
And then they do this refining process.
Yeah, they really want to get all the impurities out. Make it as pure as possible.
And then they reverberate it for 13 weeks.
13 weeks?
Yeah.
That's a long time.
In a fire.
That's dedication.
That's a lot of work.
It is.
So what is reverberation exactly?
Basically, it's like heating something in a furnace, but very carefully.
Oh.
Over a long period of time.
Okay.
And the idea is that it allows for a slow and controlled transformation.
So it's like a slow cooking method.
Yeah, exactly.
But with fire and gold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they're essentially letting this gold stew in its own juice.
Interesting.
And they say that this releases all this earth and metallic slime.
Which is like the impurities.
Right.
Okay, then after this whole 13-week process.
They take some of this purified gold calx.
Gold calx?
Yeah, like a powder. And they pour over it this special water.
Okay.
They call it a crystalline, transparent mineral water.
Sounds fancy.
It is.
And they give it these really cryptic names.
Yeah, like Paracelsus's green lion.
Green lion.
Or Basil's aquam solventum.
Aquam solventum.
It's all very mysterious.
Very mysterious. But basically, these are like special solvents.
Okay.
That they believe have these unique dissolving powers.
Okay, so it's not just any old water.
No, it's like alchemist water.
Alchemist water.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they circulate it for 3 weeks.
Right, in a vapor fire.
Vapor fire.
It's a gentle heat
Okay.
that's supposed to help transform the gold into an oil.
They really like their analogies that they do with the cooking and the oils and all that.
It's very culinary.
Yeah, very culinary alchemy.
Yeah.
So then they talk about how gold is like incorruptible.
Right. They use this phrase, fortitudo omnis fortitudinus.
Fortitudo omnis fortitudinus.
Strength of all strengths.
Strength of all strengths.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay. They're saying that gold is like the ultimate substance.
The most powerful.
Right.
And they think it could be a universal medicine.
Right. A cure-all.
And they cite all these historical figures.
Yeah, like Avicenna.
Geber.
Arnold of Villanova.
And Arnold of Villanova supposedly cured the king of Naples.
Of leprosy.
With gold.
With gold.
Wow, that's a pretty strong claim.
Oh, it is.
But it's interesting how they use these historical references.
Yeah, they're trying to give their ideas credibility.
Yeah.
Like, look, all these smart people throughout history have believed in the power of gold.
So we're not just making this up.
Exactly.
And of course there were people who didn't buy it.
Of course.
And the author's like, yeah, those people were like blind men trying to judge colors.
Like they just don't get it.
Yeah, they can't see the truth.
Right.
He even mentions Cardanus and Scaliger.
Yeah, those guys were skeptics at first.
Right, but then they supposedly came around.
Yeah, they saw the light.
Okay, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
So then they get into potable gold.
Aurum potabile.
Aurum potabile.
Drinkable gold.
Drinkable gold. And they talk about all these crazy methods.
Yeah, like using earwax.
Earwax.
Pigeon droppings.
Yeah.
All sorts of weird stuff.
What were they thinking?
I don't know.
It's like they were just throwing things at the wall and seeing what stuck.
Yeah.
But the author's like, those are all wrong.
Yeah, he's like, you're doing it all wrong.
He's like, you need the universal menstruum of the ancient
Yes,
ones.
that's the key.
The universal menstruum.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate solvent.
Okay.
The one that can dissolve anything.
And then they get into some of the challenges with these preparations.
Yeah.
He's like, that 13-week reverberation thing, that's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
And it's dangerous.
Yeah, things can go wrong.
The gold calx could revert.
Right.
And he's like, it's not even that philosophical.
He's like, it's just a brute force method.
Yeah, he's looking for something more elegant.
More refined.
Yeah.
More alchemical.
And he even says he tried that gold oil method himself.
And it didn't work.
It didn't work.
Yeah, he's like, I got this gold calx, but it barely tinged silver.
Oh. So it was like a partial success.
Kind of.
But not what he was hoping for.
Not at all.
And that must have been so frustrating.
Oh, yeah. After 13 weeks of work to just
Yeah.
get a little silver tinge.
But even though he had these setbacks, he still believed in transmutation.
Oh, yeah. He's like, I've seen it with my own eyes.
Really?
He's like, I've seen tin and lead turn into gold.
That's a big claim.
It is.
But he seems convinced.
He does.
And he even addresses that whole, like, only God can change nature argument.
Yeah. He's like, we're not changing nature.
Right.
We're just perfecting it.
They're just revealing its true potential.
Exactly.
And he talks about the need for the right key,
The right menstruum.
the right menstruum.
Yeah.
And he says his attempts with vitriol and tartar,
Too weak.
they weren't strong enough.
Not the right key.
And then he talks about his friend,
Oh, yeah. The friend with the clear water.
the clear water.
That could dissolve gold.
And it turned blood red,
Yeah.
which is like a good sign in alchemy.
A very good sign.
Yeah.
The red tincture.
The red tincture.
It's like the holy grail of alchemy.
And he thinks this water could be close to the universal menstruum
He's like, this could be it.
because it's so gentle.
Yeah. It dissolves the gold without any harsh chemicals.
Like it's working in harmony with nature.
Exactly.
But then he warns against using corrosive menstrua.
Yeah. He's like, that's how you turn medicine into poison.
It's like a balancing act.
It is.
You got to find that sweet
You
spot.
gotta be careful.
And then he mentions Garzius Abhortus and H.D. Laurenbergius.
Yeah. Those guys had some interesting observations.
Yeah, one of them saw this water in India.
Yeah. That could soften gold.
And the other one knew about this water that could melt gold.
But without corroding it.
It's like they're finding all these examples of gentle dissolution
Yeah.
in nature.
Like nature has its own ways of working with gold.
And he makes that distinction between the gentle and the violent methods.
Yeah.
He's like, the violent methods, they just give you this leprous gold calx.
Leprous gold calx.
Not a good image.
Not at all.
But okay, so then he gets into his own personal method
Okay.
for potable gold.
Let's hear it.
So he takes laminated gold,
Thin sheets again.
yeah, and he layers it with stag's antlers.
Stag's antlers.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that before.
yeah, and they seal it up in a ceramic container
Okay.
and put it in a fire for an hour.
Okay.
And they do that 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
And then they mix it with the calcined antlers
Okay.
and reverberate it on a cupel.
A cupel.
It's like a little porous dish.
Okay.
And that gives them a brick-colored calx
Okay.
And then they extract a blood-like tincture.
Using a prepared menstruum.
Right.
Okay.
And that leaves behind a dead earth.
Dead earth.
Which supposedly has drying and cleansing property.
Well, even the leftovers are useful.
Yeah, they don't waste anything.
It's very efficient.
And then they distill the menstruum.
Okay.
And they get this purple tincture.
Purple.
Another good sign.
And they mix that with either spirit of wine or quintessence of salt.
To make it even purer.
Yeah. And he's like, this is the good stuff.
This is the real deal.
This is the philosophical, potable gold.
No harsh chemicals.
Yeah.
All natural.
All natural.
Well, alchemically natural.
Right.
Yeah.
But then he's like, okay, if you want to take it to the next level,
okay,
you got to add some live mercury.
Live mercury.
Yeah, and to make live mercury.
This is where it gets intense again.
Yeah, so they dissolve mercury in oil of vitriol.
Which is sulfuric acid.
Nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And then they distill it and sublimate it.
Repeatedly.
Yeah, they really want to purify that mercury.
They want to get rid of all the grossness.
Yeah, and then they combine that with the potable gold.
In a vapor fire.
Yeah, and it goes through all these color changes.
Yeah, black to gray, white, yellow, and finally red.
It's like a whole alchemical rainbow.
And they say that final red color, that's the sign of the panacea.
The universal remedy.
The cure for everything.
It's the goal.
Okay, so that's a lot to take in.
It is.
But it's fascinating stuff.
It is.
So then he goes on to talk about other preparations, like the oil of gold prepared in the common way.
Right.
Which uses oil of salt and oil of wine.
Okay.
And he's like, yeah, this one's tricky.
Yeah, he even admits that his earlier instructions were bad.
He's like, yeah, I messed that up.
He's like, I'm still learning.
So it's cool that he's like acknowledging his own mistakes.
Yeah, he's very honest.
Yeah, and he even gives a detailed method for making salt spirit.
From stone salt.
Yeah.
Like regular salt.
Yeah, so it's like he's trying to make things more accessible.
More practical.
Yeah.
Less mysterious.
And he says the crystals from this oil of gold can transmute lead into gold.
Yeah, mercury of Saturn into gold.
It's a bold claim.
It is.
But he seems to believe it.
He does.
And then he gives some examples of how this oil was used.
Yeah, like for venereal disease.
Syphilis.
Yeah.
And smallpox and measles.
Right.
And he describes the treatments.
Yeah, like making the patient sweat.
And giving them sulfur, salt, and tartar baths.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how they combined alchemy with more traditional medicine.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Like they weren't just relying on magic.
Right, they were using practical remedies as well.
Yeah.
And then he talks about another oil of gold method.
Okay.
That uses quicksilver and sulfur and oil of vitriol.
Okay.
But he's not a fan of this one.
He's skeptical.
Yeah, he's like, vitriol can't carry gold over the alembic.
Yeah, he's thinking about the chemistry,
right,
the actual properties of the substances.
And then he talks about some simpler ways to calcine gold.
Yeah.
Like heating it in a glass furnace for 14 days.
Okay.
Or with sulfur for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And he says that makes the gold really soft.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's like they had different methods for different purposes.
Right. Different levels of intensity. And then there's this part where he talks about making potable gold with oil of tartar.
Okay.
But then he's like, oh, by the way, this is how you make fulminating gold.
Which is explosive.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Yeah. Don't try this at home.
Seriously.
It's like, it's really dangerous.
It can blow your fingers off.
Okay. So that's a good warning.
Yeah.
And then he describes the quintessence of gold.
Which is like the most refined essence of gold.
Yeah. And this one uses brown calx and sulfur and this crystalline coagulated dry water.
Crystalline coagulated dry water.
Yeah, it's very alchemical.
Very mysterious.
Yeah, and vinegar of nature.
And you can even add antimony or vitriol.
So it's like a choose-your-own-adventure recipe?
Kind of.
And then there's this whole thing about a secret spirit.
Oh, yeah.
That you can use to make potable gold.
You got to find it near silver mines.
During a specific astronomical alignment.
It's all very specific.
Very specific.
But very secret.
Yeah, and he's like, you got to observe it carefully.
Yeah, you can't just trust what other people tell you.
And finally, he's like, don't believe everything you read.
Yeah.
He's like, I tried to follow Libavius's instructions.
And it was a disaster.
It didn't work.
Oh.
So it's like, even in the world of alchemy, you got to be careful who you trust.
Yeah, you got to do your own research.
So there you have it.
The Complete Treatise on Gold.
It's a wild ride.
It is.
It's a mix of practical medicine.
Versatile beliefs.
Weird experiments.
Weird explosions.
Yeah, it's got it all.
It's a good time.
But it's really fascinating to see how they were trying to understand the world.
Yeah, they were asking big questions.
Yeah, and experimenting and making discoveries.
Even if some of those discoveries were a little bit misguided.
Right.
But hey, That's how science works.
Yeah, you got to try things out.
You got to make mistakes.
And learn from them.
Exactly.
So hopefully you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of alchemical medicine.
Yeah.
And the quest for the philosopher's elixir.
The ultimate goal.
And if you're interested in learning more, there's a whole world of alchemical texts out there.
Just waiting to be explored.
So keep searching, keep learning, and keep those recommendations coming.
Yeah, we love to hear from you.
Thanks for listening.
Until next time. Bye!